For any person, nomination to serve as a Cabinet Minister is a great personal honour. Deputy Charlie Flanagan has every right to be pleased and proud of this nomination. I and my party congratulate the Deputy and also his family and supporters, without whom he would not have reached this moment. And I know it is a day that they will celebrate and remember with great satisfaction. And likewise, I wish Minister Fitzgerald well in her new portfolio. Due to the government's large majority, the outcome of this debate is not in question. However, it is still important that we address the crisis which has led to this appointment being required. Appointing a new minister does not by itself deal with what has happened and the unprecedented collapse in public confidence in vital parts of the administration of justice. We are getting a new minister, but what we need is a new direction. If all we get is a new face carrying on with the same policies and the same approach, then further damage will be done. It is simply absurd that we are today discussing the replacement of a Minister for Justice without knowing anything about the specific information due to which he resigned, or because of which he resigned. While Deputy Shatter's resignation letter is full of his usual defiance and failure to admit error, clearly Mr Gearden has made extremely serious points about the mishandling of grave material. Making sure that this cannot happen again, to formally end the era of dismissing inconvenient evidence and attacking opponents, has to be at the top of the new minister's agenda. Yet we have been denied the opportunity to see the Gearden report before Deputy Shatter's successor is appointed. We've also again been denied even the most basic information about how the Taoiseach, with Minister Shatter, effectively pushed the Garda Commissioner into resignation. And this shows many things, but respect for accountability is not one of them. Since the first decades of this state, there has not been such controversy concerning the interaction of ministers in the Garda Síochána. Before this can be dealt with, the government must first acknowledge it. Instead of doing this, what we have heard from the Taoiseach and the rest of the government are assertions that Minister Shatter did a great job and everything was fine, even though he chose to resign. In recent years, the Department of Justice has been run with no accountability and intolerance of questions, unnecessary conflicts, and the refusal to respect the views of others. Some important legislation has emerged, but it is absolutely not true that the administration of justice has been radically reformed. In fact, key elements of it have been undermined. We need a minister who will rebuild the shattered relationship between government and the Garda Síochána, who respects the fact that a Garda working in the community makes an impact which can never be matched by touring huge distances in squad cars, who is willing to listen to Gardaí and engage with their representative organisations. We need a minister who is willing to rein back on changes to the legal system which will make it impossible for ordinary people to be represented by the best legal talent. Someone who understands that personal prejudice is not the same thing as evidence when imposing changes no one is asking for and which will deliver no credible benefits but potentially make an elite system even more elitist. We need a minister who believes that whistleblowers have a legitimate role to play, because things can go wrong even in the best of systems, and the justice system needs a minister who does not brush aside inconvenient information. We do agree, absolutely, that we do not need another minister who combines the roles of Minister for Justice and Minister for Defence. Leaving aside the fact that the near universal practice internationally is to separate these roles, the experiment of joining them has been a complete failure. The Defence Forces believe that they've been significantly reduced in terms of political engagement, and the drift in policy terms has been very obvious. Morale is very, very low amongst the Defence Forces, and Taoiseach, you must take responsibility for that failed experiment and a fundamentally wrong decision in principle. The Department of Defence was in many ways a model of public sector reform in the past decade and a half. Before the crisis, they had reduced numbers, increased activity, and added significantly to Ireland's status as an international force for peace. There is no reason for the departments to be joined. It has been bad for defence, and the crisis to be addressed in justice is big enough to take up the whole time of a minister. The resignation of Deputy Shatter is something which regrettably should have happened a long time ago. He has chosen to leave without admitting any error and in the name of protecting the electoral interests of the government. He has, however, pointed out his gratitude to the Taoiseach and colleagues for their constant and steadfast support. And this is support which continued up to yesterday lunchtime, when the Taoiseach said he had full confidence in Deputy Shatter. And this steadfast support from Fine Gael and Labour stands in sharp contrast to their approach to former Minister Roisin Shortall, who was implementing clear policies on primary care that were contained in the programme for government, which were noble in themselves and sought to help people in marginalised and disadvantaged communities. But she was left go without any defence whatsoever. If Minister Shatter's resignation is to have any meaning, then the government owes us an explanation for the sheer number of times they choose to defend the indefensible. The Taoiseach, Taoiseach and their parties were happy to allow behaviour which should never have been acceptable. When information was withheld about the Smithick inquiry, Fine Gael and Labour had no problem. When confidential information was illegally used to make a false allegation of hypocrisy against a deputy, Fine Gael and Labour said, carry on. When information damaging to another deputy was leaked and no action was taken, Fine Gael and Labour didn't say a word. When a friend and donor was appointed as confidential recipient, Fine Gael and Labour thought there was no problem. When whistleblowers with grave information were marginalised and their concerns dismissed, Fine Gael and Labour tried to ignore it, but eventually, and as late as possible, said that whatever the problem was, it wasn't political. When I was attacked in here for having the temerity to challenge what had happened, Fine Gael and Labour cheered along and were happy to vote confidence in this behaviour. Last night, the corridors of Leinster House were full of Fine Gael and Labour TDs talking about how Deputy Shatter's resignation somehow brought this chapter to an end. In doing this, they've decided that their record of supporting the behaviour which led to the resignation is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant and is a key factor in this debate. It's not just a new minister we need, it's an understanding that the arrogant and unaccountable way in which this government as a whole has behaved is what led to this resignation. That's at the heart of this. Arrogance and unaccountable behaviour on behalf of the government. It's the hallmark of all your behaviour to opposition and to very serious issues that are raised in this House. And that's fundamentally, in my view, what has led to Minister Shatter's resignation and the need to appoint a new member of government. This has to change, and we need to see some respect. We need to certainly... No one interrupted any minister on the other side of the House from here. It's a very serious debate.
More arrogance.
We are talking about the resignation.
Stay quiet, please.
More arrogance.
And show respect in the House on all sides, please. Thank you.
We're talking about the resignation of a very senior minister from a very senior portfolio and the necessity to appoint a new member of government. And the fundamental behaviour of government has to change. And above all, Taoiseach, and I'll say this to you, we need respect for other people's opinions, irrespective of who they are, whether they are whistleblowers, whether they're deputies that you have no time for, be they independent or members of the opposition. You have to show that respect, because it's been sadly lacking in your demeanour and the government's demeanour for too long. There has to be a genuine openness to criticism, no matter from what quarter it comes from. Because to date, there hasn't been that openness to genuine criticism, either in the House or indeed outside of the House. And if that doesn't happen, Taoiseach, then nothing at all will have changed. Thank you, Count Corlin.
Thank you.